In just a moment, our service is going to begin. Family is going to enter in just a moment. If you're able, I would ask you to please rise when the family enters. Those of you who might have cellular devices, I'd ask you to please turn them to the off position. Family will enter in just a moment. Officiating our service today will be Rabbi Ari Hart.
You may be seated. We're here together today, profoundly sad. Many of us in shock at the loss of such an impactful and visionary and beloved man. Dr. David Frim, David Mordechai ben Shammai Peretz Halevi, beloved husband of Tammy for 34 years, loving father of Daniel, Adam, and Michael, dear brother of Gerald and Sarah, and the late Ed, cherished son of Rosalind and the late Sumner. Tzarat Rabim Chetzi Nechama. The Gemara says that the suffering of the many is a half comfort. And looking out on this room, how many people have gathered here? How many more are present, I'm sure virtually, and thinking of us in this moment? Seeing the collective sadness in this room, the collective tsar, is a reflection of how much respect and love so many had for David. And I hope that this collective tsar of the Rabbim is a half comfort, a chetzi nechama to the family, to all of us. David, a truly modest, private, humble man, would have likely found himself very uncomfortable with the attention and the praise and the many words that will be shared today and in the days and weeks and years to come. Yet it's so important that we gather together and offer these words to thank him, to honor him and the sacred values he represented, and to commit ourselves to not merely admire, but to strive towards the principles and values and excellence for which he stood. We'll begin this morning with a recitation of Tehillim, of Psalms, followed by words of memory from Sarah Foreman, David's sister, Pesach Kleiman, his brother-in-law, Arthur Rosenson, remarks from the children, from the sons, and then some final closing words of memory. We'll begin with Psalm 23, a psalm about no fear, about walking through the valley of the shadow of death, about seeing, suffering, and walking with faith. This was David. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Rori Lo Echzar, Binodesha Yarbitzeni Al Mei Menuchot Yinahaleni. Nafshi Yeshovev Yancheni B'Magle Tzedek Laman Shemo. Gam Ki Elech B'Geit Tzalmavet Lo Yira Ra Ki Ata Imadi. Shivtecha Mishantecha Hema Yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai dishanta b'shem roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lies me down in green pastures, he leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul, guiding me along the right paths for the sake of his name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff encourage me. You set a table before me in the face of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. May only a goodness and kindness follow me all the days of my life, and let me live in the Lord's house forevermore. Now, welcome Sarah to share some words.
My dear brother David left this world before his time. He played many roles in his life: son, brother, father, husband, neurosurgeon, scientist, star athlete, avid Boston sports fan, Judaic scholar, teacher, mentor, and all-around great guy, kind of like Buckaroo Banzai. To me, he was my buddy. Being number 3 and 4 of the Frim crew gave us a natural bond that lasted for our entire lives. When I was very little, I would call him Dovey, and as my grandmother would call me Lovey, together we were lovey-dovey. When we were young, all 4 of us spent hours playing in the backyard, David wrestling with Eddie and Jerry. We ran around playing tag. David ran circles around us all. We played Star Trek in the basement or dissected worms outside. As you can imagine, total chaos, a lively and busy time in the Frim household, with our parents getting their needed rest only when the 4 of us shipped out to Camp Yavne for the summer. Through the years, David never let go of his youthful enthusiasm. Many ask how David became interested in neurosurgery. I think I played at least a little role in that one. When our Bubby Steinhardt would visit, she would always come to my room, sit near my bed, and tell me a bedtime story. David would always sneak into my room and curl up at the end of my bed and join me to hear about the amazing adventures of Dr. Ben Casey, who in our case was a pediatrician neurosurgeon. Bubby Steinhardt's stories always involved children who had some sort of head trauma or injury. They fell off the swing or the like. They had concussions, lacerations, comas, subdural hematomas, and the occasional appendicitis. All of the children in these stories made it to the hospital where Dr. Ben Casey took care of them, often operated on them, and saved the day, always in the most kind and compassionate way. After stories like that, how could I not become a pediatrician and David a neurosurgeon? David always loved the idea of being a surgeon. When he was a teenager, he would come to the Shabbat dinner table after washing hands before motzi, holding his hands up as if after a surgical scrub. His first surgical procedure at age 6 involved, I believe, one of my 2 braids. Needless to say, he was very excited to be able to spend 7 years at Harvard Medical School, where we were classmates for a few years. He loved taking care of patients and finding out about people and their conditions. David was the one to introduce me to my mentor in adolescent clinic, where he had spent time doing evening clinic while working on his PhD. David was not content to leave clinical medicine behind for the 3 years of his PhD. Working with patients put wind in his sail, and from what I could tell, became the anchor of his research endeavors. From what I gleaned from his patients that we shared, and yes, he did refer me some adolescent patients over the years, he was one of the most caring clinicians around. He was the kind of doctor who really listened, a doctor's doctor. David and I were lucky to share our medical careers, and with his intense competitive nature, He was not happy that I was going to graduate from med school first. He took his PhD research up a notch to make sure to graduate with the class of '88, my class. However, little did he know that I was going to become an FO foreman before graduation, alphabetically receiving my diploma before his FR Frim. Interestingly, David and Tammy started dating at about the same time that Russ and I did. Thankfully, Russ survived David's new boyfriend interrogation, and our relationship was able to move forward at a reasonable pace. However, it took David a while longer to convince Tammy to marry him, the story of which he revealed in immense detail to my son Sam over dinner of Indian food in St. Louis some years ago. Tammy was David's one and only. He would not have it any other way. She was his true love. Tammy was the real deal, incredible intelligence, kind, and an accomplished musician, not to mention having beautiful blue eyes and brown hair. I, too, am in awe of Tammy and her love for David over these past 34 plus years, but especially her empathy and compassion over these past 3 or more years. Tammy, you are truly an amazing human being, and that is an understatement. Finally, I would be remiss without mentioning David's love of family and commitment to caretaking. When Tammy and I delivered our first children days apart, David called up to my room to find out which floor I was on, and then made sure Tammy and I were near the same nursery area so that Sam and Daniel could be first roommates. Daniel's first night of life was with 2-day-old cousin Sam at his side. Over the years, David absolutely rejoiced at his sons. He loved you all so much. I will leave those stories for another time, but needless to say, he was tremendously proud of the amazing young men you have all become. He loved watching all our kids grow up, the Claymans and the Frims. He loved connecting with his nieces and nephews. In Sam, Jossie, and Yoni's case, making sure to take them out to dinner when he was in town in New York City or St. Louis, where he was happy to dole out advice about just about everything. Though incredibly busy, David made time to check in on our father as he became ill, be present for our mother's surgeries, and of course, never missing a chance to take his nieces on tours of the Ether Dome at Mass General, giving a full historical accounting of the importance of that room. My beloved brother and buddy for life has left this world too soon, and though we are all blessed to have been able to share our lives together, the world is sadder and emptier with his passing. His life was a blessing to us all.
Pesach Clayman will now share a brief reflection.
David Mordechai ben Shammai Peretz HaLevi. At the peak of his powers, David was a brilliant, critical thinker. Yet at the same time, he managed to exemplify sincere humility. As a physician and scientist, he was passionate about medicine and surgery, but focused intensely on using these tools for the care of the patient and improving the lives of children with complex illnesses that came to him for help. As a Jew, he, to me, clearly had an intimate relationship with Hashem. Aside for his acts of chesed, when time allowed, he enjoyed Torah study and employed malacha on Shabbos only for pikuach nefesh. David Mordechai ben Shammai Peretz HaLevi will sorely be missed. Baruch dein Emes.
As we all know, in his career, David worked tirelessly. He helped save and prolong thousands of lives. With the author's permission, I've been asked to read to you one unsolicited letter that David and Tammy received in 2022. It's from Bob Michael, Professor Emeritus, Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. Dear Dr. Frim and Tammy, I was so sorry to hear of your illness, David. As for the past nearly 20 years, you have been someone I have admired and appreciated. When my wife, Nancy, was diagnosed with a brain tumor on Labor Day 2004, you were on call and came to see Nancy. Upon meeting you, she broke into tears. She told you that she had been fired 3 days earlier for poor performance over the previous month. This was because of the unknown glioblastoma. You said to her, well, we'll deal with this tumor this week, and then, since you are a UChicago PhD research virologist, I'll hire you. You did both. Nancy had a subsequent 18 months of good life thanks to the surgery you performed. And thanks to the research work you assigned her, I believe her name is on a couple of your research papers. You gave her the satisfaction of knowing her research skills were still valued. I don't know if you were ever told that there's now an endowed pre-doctoral fellowship in her honor. Her and my respect for the medical sciences at U of Chicago hinge, in no small part, on the kindness you showed her. Your compassion, sensitive care, and encouragement of Nancy in her final year and a half meant so much to us both. Hearing that you are now ill causes me great sadness. You are still a young man, as was Nancy at 62 when she became ill. I write to again say thank you for the care you gave her, and I'm sure your many other patients. Beyond the medical care, there is the human intention and genuine concern and compassion you paid them. I want to let your family know how much affection there is for you throughout the community. My best wishes to you both. Sincerely, Bob Michael. I did not know David professionally, except I know he performed surgeries that lasted an insane amount of hours. But I do know that David was kind, considerate, humble, very careful not to speak ill of others, and a damn good athlete. We've got a lot of good athletes in this neighborhood, but as far as I know, David was the only person who set an all-time record for track at his university. And I never beat him in tennis. He was a good friend, and I will miss him.
I am David's second son. Today I am reading remarks written jointly by my two brothers, Daniel and Michael, and myself. When each of us graduated from high school and moved out of our childhood home, our father presented us with the same set of gifts: an ornate wooden compass and a sextant, both tools of maritime navigation. Our father was an intensely curious person, capable in practical pursuits, but deeply interested in even the most esoteric subjects. In that sense, these tools for wayfinding reflected his desire to explore. But at the same time, they represented something deeper. He gave us, in the 18 years before we each left the house for college, the tools to chart our own path, encouraging us to find our own passions and explore as he did. Though our father loved many things, Star Trek, Star Wars, laning and davening, tennis, Arthurian legends, archery, swimming, running, Torah study, and science, to name just a few, he would join us in exploring our own passions. Each of the three of us shared a different subset of our father's interests, and we loved exploring these pursuits together with him. But even when our interests did not overlap, he always made it clear to us that he rejoiced in the lives and careers we chose for ourselves. He is always there to provide guidance and advice, and he took great care to help us make independent decisions that were right for us. Out of the many, many lessons and values our Father impressed upon us, there are a few themes we most wish to highlight today. This is not meant to be exhaustive, nor does it begin to capture even a partial picture of who our Father was, but we do believe these values record to how he viewed his place in the world and how he sought to act in it. We feel that sharing these lessons and expressing our commitment to upholding them is one of the ways we can honor his blessed memory. First, our Father believed in striving for the very best one could achieve. He often chided us when we said a job we had done was, quote, good enough. He did not believe in good enough. Instead, he taught us how important it is to honor one's commitments and to do so with a level of devotion that we could feel genuinely proud of, regardless of the size or importance of the task, and even if that meant going far beyond what others demanded or expected. Do or do not, there is no try, he would often quote to us. When our Father was entrusted with a task, whether it be a medical visit, reading from the Torah, carrying out scientific research, or guiding his children's Jewish and secular educations, he dedicated himself fully, not pausing until the job was done to the very, very best of his abilities. Second, our Father was a man of genuine, heartfelt faith. Every day he confronted the heart-wrenching realities of children and their families struggling with serious illness, and he devoted so much of himself to being present with his patients during those struggles. But despite how much hardship he witnessed as a doctor, our Father believed to his core in the goodness of the world and of God. He never doubted that things would turn out as they should. When we face disappointment in our own lives, our Father would quote a piece of Talmudic wisdom, Gamzu Latova, this too is for good. He believed that we cannot know our own fate, but that we can and must always strive to do the right thing. The rest would be taken care of. Father always upheld these ideals, and because of his sense of faith, he seemed to fear nothing in this world. Finally, something that our Father endeavored to give all of us was the knowledge necessary to become independent Jewish learners and community members. He took his own unique approach to being Jewish, and the one-on-one teaching he provided was designed to help us do the same. He treasured the Hebrew language, Jewish history, and Jewish texts from the bottom of his heart. The lessons and traditions of Yiddishkeit he has passed down to us are irreplaceable pieces of him. We are so grateful to have them. Our Father showed an unwavering devotion to duty in everything he did. He never considered any task to be beneath him, and he never complained about the hard work that fell on his shoulders, even when his responsibilities were truly overwhelming. He contributed to people's lives in many different ways, but what we want to emphasize is how he was always there for us, loved us, and believed in us. Others knew him as a doctor, teacher, mentor, and friend, but we knew him just as our Father. Even beyond everything else he did and all the other people whom he helped or healed, in his role as a father, he was a true tzaddik. We will always miss him, and we will always continue to be inspired by the example he set.
This week's Torah portion, Ki Tetzei, contains a promise which is listed several times in the book of Dvarim, in this book, last book of the Torah. Leman yitav lach ve'arachta yamim, that it shall be good for you and you shall have long days. One of the things we hope for in this season of Elul, the Yamim Noraim, the holy days, is this blessing of long days, length of days. There's a famous story I often think about, which occurred at the funeral of the Sfat Emet, the second Ger Rebbe, who passed away when he was only 58 years old. Thousands of people gathered at the funeral, and his son, the Imrei Emes, rose to eulogize him and said, "Our father was blessed to have Arichut Yamim. Our father had length of days." And the crowd was shocked. How could they say this? His father was only 58 years old. The Imrei Emet went on to explain that his father, had made the most of every single day of his life. Each one of his days was long and fulfilled. And so while the number of David's days, the number was cut way too short, the length of each and every individual day that David lived was not. He lived each day with the bracha of Arichut Yamim, of a long day, incredible days. that put together made an incredible life. There's an article from Medicine on the Midway, a University of Chicago medical school publication from the spring of 2011, which is about a summer camp called Discover Camp that, unbeknownst to his family, David founded. They thought he was involved, showed up a little bit. David created this camp, the Discover Camp. And he created this camp for the patients in his practice, to allow them to experience both the joy that they could not experience at other summer camps where it was not safe for them to participate, and the fellowship with other patients and families so they could be supported. And so this article, which describes the camp that Dr. Frim created, begins as follows. Pediatric neurosurgeon David Frim doesn't flaunt his accomplishments. A specialist in congenital anomalies of the nervous system, Frim, MD, PhD, chief of neurosurgery, and the Ralph Cannon Professor of Surgery and Pediatrics, doesn't boast about the hundreds of complex surgeries he has performed on children with hydrocephalus, epilepsy, and other neurological disorders. He'll likely not mention the summer retreat he started that caters specifically to families living with chronic neurological conditions. And he won't gloat about his pioneering research on the cognitive effects of several rare genetic syndromes. It's just a tiny little thing, Frim said, plucking a slightly yellowed document from his office bookshelf, his first public paper in pediatric neurosurgery from 1990, about a brain malformation he spent the past 2 decades investigating. What Frim will talk about is the resilience and the courage of his young patients. Such a beautiful encapsulation of David's unique form of excellence. Excellence that was evident early on as a child, excellence in school from a young age wanting to be a doctor, from a young age wanting to pursue Torah learning, which he did diligently on his own in Hebrew school and the rigorous Prostor high school program. Excellence which continued in his academic work, undergraduate, medical school, PhD at Harvard University, fellowships at Boston Children's Hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital, residencies, internships. And while pursuing this excellence in education, also an excellence in Jewish education. Alongside these accomplishments, pursuing a bachelor's degree in Jewish education from Hebrew College, biking back and forth between Hebrew College and Harvard. Teaching Torah throughout his undergraduate and graduate work. David was a person of intellectual rigor and excellence who took learning very seriously. But I was thinking about the difference between the Western concept of education and the Jewish concept of chinuch. In English, educate comes from the Latin root educare, which means to bring forth. It implies self-expression. The Hebrew word for education is chinuch, which means to dedicate, dedication. Chinuch is about dedicating oneself to a higher purpose, attaching to ideals and values beyond oneself. And this was the purpose of David's education. Excellence for the sake of others, never for himself. And everything he learned, he put to use. You've already heard so much today, but I want to encourage you, when you get home, to take a moment and go on the Chicago Jewish Funeral website and read what's happened in the last 72 hours or so since the notice went up. Dozens and dozens of people, patients, parents of patients, grandparents of patients, mentees, fellow doctors, nurses, and more have written so many comments. I just want to share a few with you now. They're unbelievable. And their words reflect his impact more than anything I could say. I'm going to quote directly. He took on my case when 3 other neurosurgeons turned me down. He literally saved my life. Dr. Frim was an amazing doctor. He gave me hope when I didn't feel like I had any. Dr. Frim, you have earned your angel wings, and I know that you are rocking your bow tie. I would like to thank his family for sharing this amazing man with all of us. He gave my daughter her life back and attended her wedding. As kind as Dr. Frim was, he paid tenacious attention to the detail and care of his patients. He had the highest expectations of his trainees. It was an honor to work with him. He was the doctor who did 3 of my surgeries. I've seen him since I was 5 years old, and we used to eat black olives together. My son is forever grateful for the life Dr. Frim enabled him to have. He is reminded every day when he looks in the mirror, not only at the back of his head, but the tattoo he has with Dr. Frim's name on it. I don't know how Dave would have felt about that. 2 of my grandchildren are alive and well because of his skill and brilliant experience. I will always say his name. And the final one. I put my life in the careful hands of Dr. Frim in 2004 when I was 13. I had already been dealing with years of past surgical complications before I first saw him, and he is the one who saved me. I now have 2 children. Not only because he allowed me the opportunity to live with his surgeries, but also because he never stopped quietly encouraging me to live my life and to have a future. I'm forever grateful to him and the future he gave me. That is chinuch. That is dedication. That is using his gifts, his education, his focus, his brain each day to the fullest to save lives and give hope to hundreds and hundreds of children and parents and grandparents and communities. And amazingly, while the days were so long at the hospital, so full, they were also full of life at home. And perhaps the role that David treasured most was, as the son so beautifully shared, as being a true mechanech, true educator, true leader for his children. He used his own chinuch and Torah learning, his own education, to teach his children. Taught them Torah even while they were at day school, centering the importance of a Jewish foundation and Jewish life in their lives. And he was also so very happy and fulfilled when the kids would join him in pursuits he loved, swimming or archery or Star Trek or Star Wars. But like a true educator, as the boys shared, he believed the boys should follow their own passions. You said that he followed us into our passions. It's a beautiful expression. He followed us into our passions, going along with what you were interested in, becoming interested in himself. And like a true teacher, like a true mechanech, he was present. As Tammy shared, that he somehow had this supernatural ability on the night of the solo at the orchestra recital or the parent-teacher conference. She would nudge him, remember, it's 8 o'clock, you got to be there. Don't forget. The hour would draw nearer and nearer, and she would worry, oh, he's not going to make it. And then just before the solo, just in the nick of time, all the way from the south side of Chicago, he would appear to hear and appreciate and love his children. And the result is they would go to him for advice, and he would give all the time in the world, listening and understanding, and then would respond with advice that didn't tell you what to do, but to help you figure out what was best for you. He was present as a father, and he was present as a husband to his beloved Tammy, his chavruta, his thought partner in ideas, in politics, in music, in Judaism, and of course in the raising of 3 wonderful sons. Tammy, who supported him and understood the seriousness of his work, even if didn't always understand exactly where he was or what he was doing. Tammy, a true beshert, who supported him and stood with him through the last years as well, with protection and care and dignity and respect and love. This was David, in learning, in patient care, in mentorship at home, full days. And somehow on top of all this fullness, he was also a fantastic Jew, both free-thinking and deeply pious, a genius of mind and a genius of the soul, of the neshama. An excellent Baal Tefillah, I had the honor of hearing him daven many times. An exacting and precise Baal Koreh. A man with deep emunah, with deep faith, that alongside all the pain and suffering he saw, a faith that people were good, that God was good, and that there was good to be done in the world. He believed in God's equilibrium, balance. As the Rambam writes in Hilchot Tshuva, the world is constantly on edge, tipping between good and bad. And each of us has the capacity to push the world back into the good. And perhaps this was the secret to his long days. That faith, that emunah, that good could be done in the hospital and good could be done at home, and that God wanted him to do it. The last line of the article about the camp that David founded, which I began with, Camp Discovery, ends with a quote from David. It says, quote, "They need the support. If I could, I would endow it in perpetuity." He may not have endowed the camp financially in perpetuity, though I wouldn't be shocked to somehow find out that he did. But I think he endowed us all with something even greater. He leaves an endowment in perpetuity of advances in mentorship, of brilliance and kindness, of inspiration and love. An endowment in perpetuity, felt in the lives he saved, in the students he taught, in the souls he touched, and the family he loved. This is his eternal legacy. This is his blessing for all of us. Tehei nishmato tzura b'tzorah chaim. May his soul be bound up in the bonds of life, and may his memory be for a blessing. At this point, we're going to welcome in David's guf. The casket is going to enter the room. Fellow Kohanim can step out the side doors, and David's brother Gerald will recite the Kalmaleh prayer for the ascent of his soul. I ask you to please rise. Yes, and if the pallbearers can go and bring David in as well.
אל מלא רחמים, שייכן במרמים, המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלת קדושים וטהרים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. לנשמת דוד מרדכי בן שמאי פרץ הלוי שהלך לעולמו, בעבור שבלי נדר אנו נודבים צדקה ביד אזכרת נשמתו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
This concludes our service here in the chapel. The interment will take place immediately at the family plots at Shalom Memorial Park in Arlington Heights. Following the interment, the family will be sitting Shiva. Today's Shiva will take place at the Frim residence, 3660 Davis Street in Skokie, from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. Located in your folders are all the other Shiva times, and for those of you who are online, that information is available on our website. Memorials that the family has requested can be made to 3 locations. The Margaret Hackett Family Center, the address and electronic address are present on your folder and online. The David M. Frim, MD, PhD Center for Excellence in Academic Membership Fund, MCV Foundation, that information is available both on the website and also on your folder. Or the ARC, 3500 West Peterson Avenue in Chicago. For those of you who are going in procession with the family, please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. The sticker should be placed in the front passenger side window. We would also ask that you have your bright headlights and hazard lights on at all times when you leave the chapel. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will be placing magnetic flags throughout the procession. Please today, as you drive to the cemetery, please stay as closely as you're able to the vehicle in front of you. We want to avoid any large gaps as we proceed. Also, this is especially important as we go through intersections. I ask you to consider limiting the utilization of your cellular device. I'm going to ask everyone to please rise in a moment. I'm going to ask the pallbearers to please once again step forward. And as we escort Dr. Frim, the family and clergy from the chapel. Our service is now concluded. I would ask those of you going to the cemetery to go directly to your cars. Thank you.